So today, we're going to start something new. I'm excited about it. I've been working on it for a while. It's called Counterfeit Gods. Now, we live in a culture that has gods. They're just different than what people used to think gods were. Years ago in the Old Testament, there was one story in Acts where there was this temple made from Artemis, and what actually happened is a meteorite fell from earth, and they built a temple around it, okay? And people would come from everywhere to see the meteorite, and they worshiped it, which kind of makes sense the way it happened. And it became like the thing to go to, okay? Now today we have our different kinds of temples. We have one in Washington. We have one in Dallas. We have one in Atlanta. We have different kinds of temples to different things where people come and cheer and celebrate. And today I want to talk about idols of the heart. And to talk about good things in your life and my life that we make ultimate things, and so that's not good for us. So to kind of get you thinking about this, this is kind of a hard question, but I'm going to ask it. What thing, if you lost this thing, could make you feel like you lost the will to live? That you love this so much, and don't say chocolate, okay? But something that you like so much that if you lost that, it would just be kind of over for you. That is a counterfeit God. That thing, whatever it might be, is more fundamental to you than anything else. I'll give you an example of some of these idols. Okay, idol can be a career, can be family, can be children, can be your spouse, achievement, some political cause, your own physical attractiveness, romance, human approval, power, comfort, financial security. There's a lot of different kinds of idols, and these are good things. But they're not the ultimate things. There's a guy many years ago named Augustine. People call him Augustine, St. Augustine, Florida. His name was Augustine. He happened to be a guy from Africa, a black guy, and he was like one of the smartest people that ever lived. And Augustine wrote this book called Confessions, and in the book he talks about idols, and he says the way we worship them, he calls them disordered loves. What he means by that is that there are some things that it's nothing wrong with, putting emphasis on your career, but if it should be like number 4 and you put it number 1, that's a problem. I mean, if you should have passion about your career, should be excited about it, but you should also love your family. And if you put your family ahead of your career all the time, which, by the way, places you work want you to do that. They want somebody to man the post that you have, and if you're not there, they're unhappy. And so people do that. They pour themselves into their careers and put them ahead of their families. Their families always second place or third place. And, in the Old Testament, they had these pagan religions that had child sacrifice. And we look at that as so ignorant. But how many children today are sacrificed because of careers? How many marriages are sacrificed because of careers? We put other things, we've not hierarchied our things that we are pouring into, because basically your heart, one person put it this way, heart is an idol factory. You're going to worship something. You're going to really want to do that. And so if you get these things out of order, then it's going to ultimately destroy you, because anything that you put before God, you can lose. You can lose your spouse, you can lose your career, you can lose your children, you can lose your grandkids. And if you put them as the ultimate thing, as this is high up, this is it, above God, you can lose those and it can destroy you. It's ironic that a lot of times people's careers want you to put them before the family, but then if your family crumbles, the career often doesn't like it. How many pastors that have put their career way above their family, and then after being in the ministry years, all of a sudden they go through a divorce, and then the church says, oh, well, we can't have you, you're divorced. When I wonder if they kind of caused some of it. I'm not trying to blame anybody. I'm just trying to say something that's honest. It's not just with ministers, it's with all kinds of careers. Disordered love. And so I want to talk about that in this series, about how to get the order correct. And I want to start today by looking at this story of the first call. It's the story of Abraham and Isaac. And so Abraham in the Bible is looked on as one of the persons that has more faith, one of the people that have more faith than anybody else. When it comes to having great faith, nobody except Jesus is greater than Abraham. And these two stories exemplify that. One is Genesis chapter 12. Abraham, at this time they called him Abram, was successful. Okay, he was living in this era of the Chaldees, in this area, and he'd become successful with his business and with his family. He was doing really well. But one day in his senior adult years, the Lord spoke and called Abram. And the Lord said in Genesis 12:1, said to Abram, go from your country, your people, leave not only where you live, but all of your friends and your family, your father's household, which, by the way, the family was everything to the Jewish community. This was a big deal. Leave it and go to the land. And by the way, I'm not telling you where it is. Can you imagine him going home to his wife and explaining that to her? Sarah, we're going to leave. What do you mean leave? This is where we live. I know, but this is where my family is. This is where we always lived. I know, but God told me we're going to leave. Well, where are we going? I don't know yet. If somebody said that to you right now, how good would you be at following that? Anyway, the promise was this. If you do this, verse 2, I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you, and I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. There's one catch with this, though. Abram and Sarah had no children. They had no children. And so how is he going to be made into a great nation? Because he's already a senior adult, past the age where you have children. But, we know his example of faith. Hebrews 11:8 in the great faith chapter. Anybody ask you in the New Testament, where does it talk about faith? Chapter 11 of Hebrews says, by faith, Abraham, when called to go to a place, later he would receive his inheritance, obeyed and went, even then, though he did not know where he was going. So he did it. He's a person of faith. And in verse 7, the Lord appeared to Abram as he's on his way going and says, to your offspring, I will give this land. And so Abram built an altar to the Lord who had appeared to him. But here's the sticking point. They still have no children. For years and years. You can read that over in the Bible and you think, okay, he had children. But years went by after he was told and promised this. Many years went by. Finally, after decades, the prophecy that was hard to believe, he's over 100 years old. His wife is in her 90s. Chapter 21, verse 1. Now the Lord was gracious to Sarah, as he had said, and the Lord did for Sarah what he had promised. And Sarah became pregnant and bore a son to Abraham in his old age at the very time God had promised him. And Abraham gave him the name Isaac to the son Sarah bore him. Now, do you remember what that name means? It means laughter. What a great name. Isaac, laughter. Oh, can you imagine the celebration? Sharon and I are looking forward to the first grandchild in our family is going to be born in the next couple of weeks. We're excited about that. We're pumped up about that. We don't know her name yet. I'm sure it's going to be beautiful. But this baby was so long in coming. I mean, I can't think of anybody who would have wanted a son more than Abraham. He wanted a son for years. In their culture, well, I'm going to keep going. I'll get back to that. The second call of Abraham. This first one was an example of his faith. Second, even more of his faith. It said, sometime later, God tested Abraham. Another way you could say is called. He said to him, Abraham, here I am, he replied. God said, take your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice. He's about 12 years old now. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on a mountain. I will show you. Now, I don't know if we could get this, how bad this would be. The horror of the command. We don't have child sacrifices in their worship of Yahweh and God. That's what other cultures do. How could God tell me to do this? I got a painting. Can you imagine? The son that he's waited for his whole life. This is the heart. It's being broken here. He says, sacrifice your son. And you know, mentally, I don't think we get it because they had this law of primogeniture. Okay. That means that the oldest son in the family is who inherits stuff. That's how you keep your clan going on. That's how you keep going. And so to have his oldest, I mean, that's what was so terrible when God sent the angel of death in Egypt and it killed all the firstborn of the Egyptians. What was that doing? That was destroying their inheritances. The families that only had one child, one male child, that would be it. They couldn't pass on their stuff to anybody. There's a guy that I'm a little anxious to talk about, but I just want to share this because we got to get the direness of what happened. There's a philosopher. His name was Soren Kierkegaard, and he came up with 4 alternative takes on Abraham. He wrote a whole book about this story called Fear and Trembling, which is really hard to understand, but it's very deep. And he has four alternative things that could have happened, but they didn't. But here, I'm just going to mention them. The first version, Abraham could have lied to Isaac. He could have thought, I don't want Isaac to feel bad about God telling me to kill him, and so I'm not going to say it's God's command. Second version, Abraham could have resigned to his fate and done what God told him, but been bitter for the rest of his life because God asked him to do it, even if he rescued him at the end. Version 3, Abraham is filled with guilt. He can't believe he's done this. And he praised God for forgiveness because he was willing to do this. And the fourth version, Isaac, the son, loses faith because God would have asked such a thing. Now, none of those things happened. But they make us hear the story with the power of what happened. This was a really dire thing. And I don't know if you've ever wondered why. Why would have God asked this boy that would, why did he do that? Well, let's look at that for a minute. In verse 5, he said to his servants, this is Abraham. Abraham, stay here with the donkey while I and the boy climb the mountain. And he says, we will worship and then we will come back to you. Now, why would Abraham say, we will come back to you? Because he's supposed to go sacrifice his son. I tell you why. He didn't know how it was going to happen. He says, God will do it, but I don't know how. Have you ever had that kind of faith? That you didn't know how you're going to get through this. You went to pay the bills and you didn't have enough money and you got a bill more than you have and you don't know how God's, but do you have faith? That's when you have faith. And you tell yourself, God is going to do it. I don't know how. This is the kind of faith that Abraham modeled for us. Verse 9, and they reached the place God told him about. They got to the top of the mountain. Abraham built an altar there, arranged the wood on it. He bound his son Isaac, laid him on the altar on top of the wood. He reached out his hand, took his knife to slay his son. But the angel of the Lord called out to him from heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. He said, here I am. He said, do not lay a hand on the boy. Do not do anything to him. Now I know that you fear God. And by the word fear, it means love, respect, honor. Because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son. And Abraham looked up there in the thicket and he saw there's a ram that was caught by his horns. He went over and took the ram, sacrificed it as a burnt offering instead of a son. Abraham called the place, the Lord will provide. And to this day, it's on the mountain of the Lord. It will be provided. Now, what the philosopher Kierkegaard didn't get, I don't think, is the idea in our culture. It's about us. It's about individuals and families. It's about your success, your career, that kind of thing. In their culture, it was the family. It was a focus on the family. Okay, very much so. Now, Abraham was making an idol out of Isaac. It's understandable, isn't it? He looked for this son for his whole life. And finally, when he had it, can you imagine that he spoiled the boy? How easy would it be to spoil the boy? I mean, you waited forever for him, and he shows up, and he became his total focus. And so this whole experience changed Abraham because he saw that he is not my total focus. God has to be my total focus. And this is what, God did not need to test Abraham to see what Abraham did. God knew Abraham's heart. God wanted Abraham to know because he was going to call him to do something really important. And so Abraham learned that he had great faith, became a man of great faith. Job put it this way in the story of Job. He says, but he knows the way that I take. When he's tested me, Job was tested, I will come forth as gold. And so Abraham came through that test as gold because he didn't succumb. Now, let's turn this back to us. This is a powerful story, but what has it to do with us? How do we make good things into idols? Just a few quick things. Your romantic partner, you can make them your number one. Expect them to make you good. Expect them to make you look good. And human beings cannot do all that. If you are leaning on your partner and they're the only ones, the reason you get up in the morning, then that is not the way it's supposed to be. You could look at athletes, okay? Athletes, they have this great career. Do you know what NFL stands for? Not for long. And all these great, except for maybe some quarterbacks, but most of the NFL players are in their 20s. Why? Because your body won't withstand that kind of stuff. Now, what happens when this professional athlete goes through a career-ending injury? Happens all the time. Well, they have to get physical rehab, but almost always they need therapy. Why? Because all of a sudden, their whole life has been around this career, and then they lose it all, and depression sets in. And they think, well, who am I? Who am I now that I can't run or I can't be a football player? Another example is artists who maybe becomes a celebrity. There's this woman that wrote an article about this named Cynthia Himmel for a paper called The Village Voice. And she says, she lives in New York, and she says, I have known several celebrities, normal people who became celebrities. And she says, this is what she writes. I pity celebrities. No, I do. Celebrities were once perfectly pleasant human beings, but now their wrath is awful. You see, they wanted fame, they worked for it, they pushed for it. The morning after they got it famous, each of them wanted to take an overdose. Because the giant thing they were striving for, the thing that would make them okay, once they got it, and it actually happened, day after they woke up, and they were still them. They hadn't changed any. There was this guy named David Foster Wallace, who was kind of a writer. He was a very famous novelist at one time. He took his life in his mid-40s. And he usually wrote things and said things that were really hard to understand. But right before that tragic event happened, he made this speech, graduation speech at a university. And in the speech, he said some things like this. He said, everybody worships. Everybody has reasons for choosing a God that is pretty much whatever else you worship. And if that doesn't work out, it will eat you alive. You can worship money, you'll never have enough. You can worship your body, and then you'll grow old, age will start showing, and you have 1,000,000 deaths. You can worship power, but you need to have more and more of it. You can worship intellect, but then you worry about people finding out that you're really not that smart. And all these things are unconscious. They're default settings. And this is what happened to him. Something ate him alive, and he wound up taking his life because he had not ordered things. How do you spot symptoms of idolatry in your life? One of the ways is look at the things that scare you to death. What are your nightmares? What are the things that you worry about losing? Romans says this, for although they knew God, they neither glorified him as God nor gave thanks to him, for their thinking became futile. Their foolish hearts were darkened. Though they claimed to be wise, they became fools and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images made to look like mortal men, idols, being birds and animals and reptiles. Therefore, God gave them over to the sinful desires of their heart, to sexual impurity, for the degrading of their bodies with one another. They exchanged the truth about God for a lie and worshiped and served created things rather than the Creator, who is forever praised. I want to emphasize that part. They worshiped and served created things rather than the Creator. That is idolatry. That is what was going on. You know, it doesn't have to work out that way, but it works out a lot. That these are my biggest fears. Look at your most uncontrollable emotions. There was two women, and they both had teenage sons. God bless them. And both of these sons went off the rails. Okay, and so they went to counseling, family couples counseling, and it was kind of in both situations. A lot of it was because of the dad not engaging, not being there, not being a parent. And so in both couples, the woman was furious at her husband. And so what the counselor tried to do is try to, talk about forgiveness, talk about what that means, what the Bible talks about forgiveness. He talked about responsibility with the husband. And so in the first couple, after many sessions, it started working. And she started forgiving him, and he started stepping up. In the other couple, it never worked. She could not forgive him. Why couldn't she forgive him? Because she'd made an idol of her son. Her son had to be perfect. He had to have perfect grades. He had to have perfect in his behavior. He had to toe the line. Of course, he rebelled completely from that. It worked out terribly. And so she had this uncontrollable emotion. She could not forgive him. That's how you know what your idols are. So what can you do about your idols? Let's say you spot some idols, you become more aware of your idols. You basically, it's simple. You got to, not simple, hard to do. Put things that matter in the correct, right order. And that's what we're going to talk about in the next few weeks. We're going to look at different big idols with people today, like romantic love and money, those kinds of things, some other things. Well, what order should we have? Well, it's clear in the Bible. Exodus 23 says, "You shall have no other gods before me." God's first. God's word, the first. 1 Corinthians 10:31. So whether you eat or drink or whatever you do it all for who? Not your spouse, not your kids. Do it all for the glory of God. Matthew 6:33, it's my life verse. Seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. Seek God first. Matthew 22:37, love, this is the greatest commandment. Love the Lord your God, all your heart, all your soul, all your mind. So to start getting this right, we all have idols, and not necessarily bad things. We've just put them in the wrong order. So the right order is to begin with having God first in your life.